So today I'm going to answer one of your questions that you guys sent into me. And if you guys want to send in more questions, feel free in the show notes below to drop your question so I can answer it directly. And this question comes from Ekaterina Babakova, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Forgive me if I'm not. But the question is in particular, I don't know anything about money, but where should I start and how to make a financial plan and start investing if I barely can pay my debts? And so I can tell you right off the bat, the way this question's phrased respectfully is from an emotional standpoint, because if you've been following my content, all my social medias, my podcast, my YouTube, my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, everything across the board. There is no reason that this shouldn't be easy for you. And that's my goal every single day when I make content, is to make it simplified, because it should be simple. And I talk about my roadmap to financial freedom, national bestseller, A Millionaire's Guide to Building Automated Wealth. And the reason I break it down so simply, and people get so many crazy results within my Budgetdog Academy, or even, you don't even have to be part of the academy. You literally can just follow my free content. But the reason they get results is because it's simple, and simple scales and fancy fails. And everything we talk about in the financial world is simple. The reason it's confusing is because Wall Street wants it to be confusing. Because if you're confused, you pay the financial advisor a percentage of your wealth your entire life, and that's an annuity to Wall Street, and we don't want to do that. So what I want to do is walk you through exactly how to educate yourself. Education is empowerment. The more you educate yourself, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to walk you today through 5 easy steps to answer this question directly. And let me repeat, I don't know anything about money. Where should I start? How to make a financial plan and start investing if I barely can pay my debts. So these 5 easy steps that you can take today require you to think logically. And that's the biggest thing holding most people back. They have this invisible emotional lens in front of them that they can't see past. And so therefore they're emotional and they don't soak in the information like they should. And if they just soak in the information, it's going to be a lot easier than you think. So the very first thing I'm going to say is, out of the 5 big key steps I want you to take, is understanding your true free cash flow. We'll get into number 2, which kind of talks about this a little bit as well, but understanding your true free cash flow. What do I mean by that? When I talk about zero-based budgeting, I'm talking about 6 key components. So your fixed income plus your variable income minus your fixed expenses minus your variable expenses and minus one-time expenses. As you know, that's 5 pieces of the puzzle. That difference is your true free cash flow. Now, your true free cash flow, let's just say that's $2,000. Let's say your fixed income is $10,000, your variable income's $1,000, so you have $11,000 of income in total. And then after that, you have, let's say, between fixed expenses, variable expenses, and one-time expenses, big ticket items, you have $9,000 in expenses. The difference is $2,000. So let's say your true free cash flow is $2,000. That is the first starting point to this whole puzzle. If I don't know that number and I only go into a napkin and list my fixed expenses, my fixed income, and forget about all these other components I just listed, you're not going to succeed, because there's missing pieces of the completeness of the puzzle, and you need completeness and accuracy in your financial situation. So that's the first step, is just getting a clear-cut understanding of what your true free cash flow is, because as a 6 variable or 6 component of that budgeting formula I just walked you through, zero-based budgeting, the 6th one is investments, or savings and investments, that is. And so if I have $2,000 I know what to do with, now I can take that $2,000 and I can apply it to my debt. I can apply it to my savings. I can apply it to my investments. But if I don't know what my $2,000 is, it's impossible. I'm going to be guessing my whole life. I'm not going to be accurate. I'm not going to be as fast and speedy as I could be if I just knew exactly where things were. So that's the first thing. If I don't understand my free cash flow and I showed the exact formula to get there, I'm going to struggle. Now, my number 2 thing is my 3 financial statements. If I don't know and have these 3 financial statements in my situation, I will fail. Again, completeness and accuracy of financial picture, no emotion involved. So the very first thing is budgeting. Now, I think budgeting is most common, but hear me out. The formula I just talked about, fixed income plus variable income minus fixed expenses minus variable expenses and minus one-time expenses and minus savings and investments, should equal 0 on my budget. Now, if I don't have this number and I'm not applying all my income to my expenses and my investments somewhere, I'm not making the most of my money. And a lot of people are inefficient with this, and they have an inefficient system. It's manual, it's deciding month to month of what to do with it, and they don't have this automated, which we'll get to in a second, and they think they're gonna figure this out, and they think they're gonna move fast, and they're not, because my automated financial system I talk about in Budgetdog Academy is going to dominate you. And if you don't apply my automated financial system in your life, you're not gonna move as fast as my students do. And you can see on the screen as to why they move fast and how they move fast and the results they actually get. So most people think budgeting is the only tool that you can use for personal finance. finances. That's like the most incorrect statement I've ever heard. You also need more financial statements. So the second one is a balance sheet. So instead of your income and expenses, which are shown in your budget, your assets and liabilities are on your balance sheet. Think about this as your financial net worth. That is the big number that everyone's trying to get to. So when I say I'm worth over $3 million and I'm financially free and all that kind of stuff, I'm referring to the balance sheet. I'm not referring to my income. My income's irrelevant for this actual financial statement. So I need to know my assets, the value of my assets at any given point in time, and my liabilities. The difference between that, and you guys know I have no liabilities because we don't have any debt, not even our mortgage. And if you want to know why we paid that off, in the top right-hand corner, I'll show you why. But the difference between assets and liabilities is your net worth. Now, think about this from a practical sense. You go to the gym and you tell a trainer that you want to lose a bunch of weight or you want to gain a bunch of weight, depending on which direction you want to head. Maybe you're trying to beef up, maybe you're trying to lose weight, whatever the case is. That gym trainer needs to know where you currently sit, and that is what your net worth is. That is your financial snapshot. So if I know where I currently sit, it's a lot easier to go north or south because I know where I'm actually at versus I don't even know where I'm at in the map. And so very similar situation. If you don't know where you're sitting at, you don't know which way to go, you don't know which principles or which strategies to apply to get to that actual goal. I need to know where I'm starting, point A. I need to know where I'm trying to get, point B, and your balance sheet will help you start that process. Now, your budget is the driving vehicle from point A to point B. And if you know what you're doing from a cash flow perspective, and if you understand, number one, understanding your true free cash flow, that will take you from point A to point B in the most efficient route possible, assuming you have all the education that goes with that. Now, my number 3 statement is my amortization schedule. So some people have this, some people don't. If you have any bit of debt of any sort, you need one. If you don't have debt like myself, you can get rid of this statement entirely. So every liability listed on your balance sheet should have an associated amortization schedule. All this is a debt payoff timeline. It's going to show you your principal, your interest, your exact timeline. I have every one of my students do a waterfall analysis to show the exact timeline. So when somebody comes to me and they say, well, I don't know when I'm going to pay off my student debt, or I don't know if I can ever pay off my credit card debt. You're speaking with emotion and you don't have a financial plan, and this is why you feel the way you feel. Do you want to feel crappy about your financial situation? If yes, proceed to do what you've always done. If no, you join Budgetdog Academy, you go in the show notes below and you book a call today. So once I have everything on paper and I have everything lined out and I know exactly where I'm headed, I know my true free cash flow, I have my budget, I have my balance sheet, I have my amortization schedule, everything's lined out from a debt payoff perspective, an investment perspective. I know when I'm going to become a millionaire. I know when I'm going to become financially free. I know all of these answers because I literally just did a math equation on a piece of paper. Now the third piece is automation. I can't tell you how important this is. If you don't automate your finances, you're not going to win. If you try to manually do your finances, my automated financial system will blow you out of the water, respectfully, because robots are better than humans at the end of the day. And so if I let my human emotion and my human judgment get involved in this situation, I'm not going to win with finance. I'm going to constantly have things that pop up. I'm going to think emotionally. I'm going to make bad decisions in the market depending on how the market's actually performing. And I'm going to continually lose to Budgetdog's automated financial system. So I know automation sounds obvious or sounds common sense, but I can't tell you how many people actually do this. Like, very few people actually apply this to your debt paydowns, your investments, your bill pay, and everything in your financial system should be automated. My students take 30 minutes a month on their finances, and they move a lot faster than the person that's spending hours on end with their finances every single month because they don't have a system. And if you guess manually, you're going to continue to lose with money. Now, the fourth step is applying the big rules of thumb to your financial situation. So there's a few things in your financial picture that are going to make or break you. It's not the call fees. It's not the small expenses. Sure, that could get you. Don't get me wrong. I don't downplay that because there's a lot of people that overspend in like Amazon and stuff like that. So don't ignore that. But what I will say is that if you apply the big rules of thumb to your financial situation with all of your numbers laid out, you'll probably do okay. You'll probably be within reason. And so here are some of the big ones I think is the most important. So the first thing is taxes. Taxes are your biggest expense your entire life. So for your taxes in particular, you have to have a tax strategy. There is no rule of thumb necessarily for this, but the rule of thumb is to work with a financial professional like myself or somebody else to make sure you're paying the least amount of taxes possible over the long haul. Most middle-class individuals, most average folks out there think that you need to pay the least amount of taxes this year, therefore deferring them to later to get only screwed on the back end. That's not how a good CPA actually operates like myself. The way I'm operating as a CPA and how I look at my taxes and all my students' taxes is I'm looking at the most efficient route from a 40-year investment period, or let's call it 20 to 60 years old. How do I pay the least amount of taxes during that overall period? Some is maybe deferral, some is taking the tax hit out, it just depends. And so making sure you understand how to apply that to your situation is going to make or break you, because taxes are your biggest expense your entire life. But most Americans don't even consider taxes as an expense because they're like, oh, well, everybody pays taxes. Not everybody pays the same amount of taxes, as we all know. So taxes are the first piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle is a mortgage or living. You should not spend more than 25% of your take-home pay. If you're spending more than 25% of your take-home pay, I don't care if you live in California or New York, you are overspending on housing, whether that's rent or a mortgage, and you need to get under 25% of your take-home pay. And that includes principal and interest and homeowner's insurance, and also any PMI that you potentially may pay. So I want to make sure that's less than 25% of my take-home. If I'm making $5,000 take-home per month, actually hits my bank account, I need to spend no more than $1,250 on my housing. That's number 2. Number 3 is car. So I always operate off the 20, 4, and 10 rule. So 20, 4, and 10 rule. All this is really simple. My down payment on my car is at least 20%. I at least operate out of a 4-year term on that car, so 48-month or less term. All of my expenses relating to my car are 10% or less of my income, and that's my take-home pay. And so therefore, I want to make sure that I'm spending little amount of money on my car at the end of the day. Now, ideally, I'd love for you to pay cash for your car. That's what we do for everything. We just bought a 2023 VW Atlas for $45,000 in 2023, and we paid cash for that. We love the car, it's a great car, but it wouldn't be as good if I had a loan on it. But if it's not practical to spend cash on a car, which is totally reasonable, I think the 24-10 rule is great. And if you want to get even better, do the 23 and 8 and apply the same principles I just talked about, but 23-8, because it's lesser term and lesser expense. And then the last big rule of thumb is food. We all know food is a huge piece of the puzzle, and unfortunately, with inflation crushing families, this is a big concern for a lot of families. And I have a lot of videos on inflation and why this is such a big deal, but you need to pay attention. So what I like to do is keep all of food, we're talking groceries and eating out, less than 15%, ideally less than 10%, but at least less than 15% of my take-home pay. And if I can apply these 4 big rules of thumb, which we talked about: taxes, mortgage or living in general, car, and also food, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to stay within a reason as long as I'm not overspending in other categories like gambling or something crazy like Amazon. I'm going to be fine, and I can build wealth because I have enough money in my pocket outside of that stuff to build real wealth. And my 5th step of this whole entire puzzle is investing 15% of gross income into retirement through index funds and ETFs. We talk about index funds and ETFs all the time, and for a good reason. There's a reason we talk about ETFs and index funds, because they are the best way to invest for 99% of people, and it's not even a debate or an argument. Any bit of data could back this up. So I'm going to share a little bit of data with you. Over the last 20 years, the average investor performed at 3% returns, where the average market, just if you were the simple S&P 500, which I'm not implying to go do, but if you were just the S&P 500, you would be at 10% returns over the last 20 years. That is embarrassing for the average investor out there, but the reason the average investor becomes the average investor is because they do everything I tell them not to do. Being a good investor doesn't take a whole lot. Being a bad investor just takes doing a lot of stuff. And if you do more, you're gonna fail more. The simple process works. So when I talk about being the average market, like the S&P 500, or like myself that beats the average market by 5% over the last 10 years, I am talking about fundamentals, basic stuff. You don't have to crush the market to actually win. And in fact, a 5% swing in the markets above the market is insane. That is halfway to the Warren Buffett type of returns. Now, when I talk about this, what I'm saying is that the impact of the difference of somebody that's an average investor versus the average market is so substantial that it's sickening. It makes my stomach literally tighten up. And the problem is the average person, the average investor, doesn't understand how big of a deal this is. They're like, oh, well, 10% versus 3%, not that big of a deal. It's a huge deal. And I'm going to show you the numbers. So if you invest and you have $0 invested right now, but you have invested $2,500 a month for 30 years at the average market returns, you will have almost $5 million at the end of that 30-year period. However, if you're the average investor and get a 3% return over that same period, doing everything exactly the same, your end result is $1.4 million. That is a 3.5 $2.6 million difference. And why I'm so passionate about this is because I see people come to my DMs every single day that tell me all these cute stories, and they tell me essentially indirectly how they are the average investor, but they don't understand. So therefore, I'm going to be straight up with you. Do not be the average investor. And if you're listening to this, there's a good chance that you are the average investor because the law of averages tell me that you are. But I'm able to get people out of this hump and out of this issue that they constantly have with their investments by simplifying your investment framework so that you aren't the average investor anymore and you actually beat inflation. The average investor is barely pacing inflation. That's a significant concern for their well-being long-term. And this is the reason why a lot of people are broke and 8 out of 10 people are living paycheck to paycheck. There's so many things that go into that equation, but this is a big reason for that. And so what I want to do is apply these 5 principles to your life today. And like I said, apply, not just listen and go on with your day, but actually apply. You follow my account right now on YouTube and you take these principles and you apply these today. Again, you can work with my team to do this right now. You can speak with my team, go in the show notes below, book a free call with my team, make sure you're making over $100,000. You have your spouse on the call and you're ready to take action, and you learn what the academy is before you actually book a call, because the point of the call is to enroll you. So with that being said, our 5 steps that you can take today and apply is number 1, understanding your true free cash flow. Number 2, the 3 financial statements and applying that to your situation. Budget, balance sheet, amortization schedule. Automating everything is number 3. Number 4 is applying those big rules of thumb to your financial situation. And number 5 is investing 15% at a minimum of your gross income into retirement for index funds and ETFs. If you do that, you're going to be golden and you're going to love me in 20, 30 years. I promise you that. A lot of students already do. And I want you to not be the average person out there, the average investor, because you're listening to Budgetdog's YouTube content. There's no reason you should be the average person out there. And I hope you take this to heart. And for what it's worth, if you ever need help, come to my DMs and send me a DM and let's work together. And I will see you next Monday.